I'm here at St. Stephen's Catholic Church in Portland, Oregon. Today is the 8th day in our Novena to St. Michael the Archangel. And today we are looking at the penultimate choir of angels, the second to the last, or the second to the closest to us, which is the choir of archangels. And I have to say it's a little bit difficult to speak about the choir of archangels because they are described in one way as being between the principalities and the angels and sharing in something of both. So, without talking about the angels, which we're going to do tomorrow, or without talking about them too much, I have to somehow describe how archangels are between the principalities and the angels. But I think it's also a good opportunity to just look at the 9 choirs again as a whole and then see how the archangels fit within that. So first, I'm looking again at Venerable Prosper Guéranger, the Liturgical Year, volume 14, on the chapter on the Feast of St. Michael. Now, I've been quoting to you from the chapter on the Feast of the Guardian Angels, October 2nd. This is the Feast of St. Michael, September 29th. And let's see what he has to say about all the choirs of angels. Flaming seraphim, glittering cherubim, steadfast thrones, the court of honor of the Most High, and possessed of the noblest inheritance. According to the Areopagite, ye receive your justice, your splendor, and your burning love by direct communication from our Lord. And through you all grace overflows from him upon the holy city. So this is the highest hierarchy right around the throne of God. And so from them all grace overflows from him upon the holy city. But it comes down from the highest rank to the lowest, through the lowest rank. All right, let's continue. Then we have the second hierarchy. Dominations, virtues, and powers, sovereign disposers, prime movers, and rulers of the universe, in whose name do ye govern the world, doubtless in his whose inheritance it is, meaning our Lord Jesus Christ. In the name of the King of glory, the God-man, the Lord strong and mighty, the Lord of hosts. And then we have the third and the lowest of the 3 hierarchies. Angels, archangels, and principalities, heaven's messengers, ambassadors, and overseers here below. Are ye not also, as the apostle says, ministers of the salvation wrought on earth by Jesus the heavenly high priest? So it seems he is calling the archangels ambassadors, while the principalities are the overseers, and we saw that yesterday. The principalities we could place just outside the communion rail, or maybe even on top of the communion rail, overlooking all that is of earth and the entire human race, and in particular nations and the churches. So then, if they are the overseers, the archangels are the ambassadors, and the angels are the messengers. Okay? Well, let's continue and see what Dom Guéranger has to say after that. We also, through this same Jesus, O most holy Trinity, glorify thee, together with the 3 princely hierarchies, which surround thy majesty with their 9 immaterial rings, as with a many-circled rampart. Well, that's a wonderful image. Now, we've been looking at the 9 choirs as proceeding out from the high altar, from the candles, the tabernacle to the altar, to the steps, to the outer sanctuary, to the communion rail, to the threshold on the earthly side of the communion rail, out to the nave and the narthex and the piazza. Okay, so that's one way we can look at it. But now what he is mentioning is that these 9 choirs surround thy majesty, the Holy Trinity, with their 9 immaterial rings, as with a many-circled rampart. So in that case, we could say, in a similar way, but we could look at the high altar and consider that the highest ring right around God is the seraphim, and just outside of them is the cherubim, and just outside of them is the thrones, and just outside of them is the dominations, just outside of them is the the virtues or powers, whichever it is that comes next, then the powers, then the principalities, then the archangels, and then the angels, and then us. And then there's the whole ecclesiastical or earthly hierarchy. To tend to thee and to draw all things to thee is their common law. So all 9 choirs of angels are concerned with drawing all things to tend to God and to draw all things to him. And this is their common law. This is what all 9 choirs have in common. Purification, illumination, union. By these 3 ways in succession or simultaneously are these noble beings attracted to God, and by the same they attract those who strive to emulate them. Now those are the 3 ways of the spiritual life that we as human beings participate in: purgation, illumination, and union. Now these are being brought together and related also to the experience or perhaps the duties of the angels. Sublime spirits, it is with your gaze ever fixed on high that ye influence those below and around you. So in other words, the hierarchies influence one another and those below, and that's us. Draw plentifully both for yourselves and for us from the central fires of the divinity. And it's not so surprising that the seraphim closest to God would be the wielders of fire, because God is described as an all-consuming fire, the fire of the divinity. Purify us from more than the involuntary infirmities of nature. Enlighten us, kindle us with your heavenly flames. For the same reason that Satan hates us, ye love us. Protect the race of the Word made flesh against the common enemy. So guard us that we may hereafter be worthy to occupy among you the places left vacant by the victims of pride. So a third of the angels fell. And what we want to make sure is that we are among perhaps the third of humanity that makes up the places left vacant by the victims of pride. The fallen angels are the victims of pride. All right. That's good. Now, what is it we ask in our chaplet from St. Michael and the Archangels? By the intercession of St. Michael and the celestial choir of archangels, may the Lord give us perseverance in faith and in all good works. Perseverance in faith, perseverance in all good works, that we may attain the glory of heaven. So in order to attain the glory of heaven, first of all, we must have the faith, and we must be learning the faith and knowing the faith ever better and better so we can draw closer to God. That's the illumination, and that leads to the union. And the purification is being purged from our sins and our sinfulness, detaching ourselves from all of that. And that is, of course, baptism separates us from eternal death and gives us new life. But then our whole experience of the spiritual life is about purgation and illumination and union. So as we are purified from our attachment to sin, and that's what exists even after baptism, we have what's called concupiscence. It's our attachment or attraction to sin. So the holy angels coming, each choir coming down from God even to us, are encouraging us and even teaching us and warning us to persevere in faith and in all good works. Okay. Well, let's see what Dionysius the Areopagite has to say about the archangels. And this is where it gets a little difficult, because it sort of requires almost reading the whole chapter. But we'll get a little bit here. All right. So we are on the third and final hierarchy, the principalities, archangels, and angels. The holy archangels have the same order as the heavenly principalities, and as I have already indicated, they join with the angels to form a single hierarchy and rank. Still, every hierarchy has first, middle, and last powers, and the holy order of the archangels has something of both the others, by virtue of being a mean between extremes. Okay, so that's why Guéranger would call them ambassadors. If we have overseers, ambassadors, and messengers, then the ambassadors are so if the principalities are overseers of the whole human race and over nations and churches, the archangels generally are entrusted with bigger jobs, but they are entrusted with particular communities. And then we have the angels who come directly to each of us. So the archangels are referred to as ambassadors to communicate from the principalities to the angels and then to us. Well, let's continue here. Let's see here. It communes, so we're speaking about the choir of archangels, communes with the most holy principalities and with the holy angels. Its relationship with the former, with the principalities, derives from the fact that, like a principality, it is returned to its transcendent principle, source. That it receives upon itself as far as possible the mark of this principle, whereas the principalities receive the full mark of the principle, and the archangels receive the mark as much as possible, and that it receives about the unity of the angels. So it receives upon itself as far as possible the mark of this principle, and that it brings about the unity of the angels, thanks to those invisible powers of ordering and arranging which it has received from that principle. Now we think about how the powers held the spirits of wickedness in subjection. So we spoke about how in the sanctuary here, everything is ordered, and everything is neat and tidy. The ceremony is beautiful and it's well ordered. And that's keeping the spirits of wickedness in subjection. So now we're relating that here to what the archangels do for in regards to the angels, that thanks to the invisible powers of ordering and arranging, they bring about the unity of the angels. So if the angels are entrusted with individuals, whereas the principalities are over the whole human race and nations, the archangels then are over smaller communities, so keeping unity among all the angels, the angels are focused on individuals, so the archangels are focused on the angels and keeping unity among them. Ambassadors from the principalities who are entrusted with the whole human race. That makes sense. Makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to you. And we will leave Dionysius the Areopagite there. And now we're going to look at even another source. We're going to look at St. Thomas Aquinas, whom we have not looked at thus far in this novena. And he has two different sections in the Summa on angels, which are very interesting. But it's worth taking a look at this while we're still on the topic of angels. All right, the question is, that's a good one. Where do I even start? Whether the grades of the orders are properly assigned. Okay, the question is, whether the grades of the orders are properly assigned. This is part 1, question 108, the 6th article, and we'll just go to I answer that. The grades of the angelic orders, that gets a little confusing. I'll skip over that so I don't trouble you. Okay. Let us then first examine the reason for the ordering of Dionysius, in which we see that, as said above in Article 1, the highest hierarchy contemplates the ideas of things in God himself. That's the highest hierarchy, the ones right up there on the altar, or the altar reminds us of. The second in the universal causes, and third in the application to particular events, or particular effects. So the highest hierarchy contemplates the ideas of things in God himself, the second in the universal causes, and the third in the application, their application to particular effects. And because God is the end not only of the angelic ministrations, but also of the whole creation, it belongs to the first hierarchy to consider the end. To the middle one belongs the universal disposition of what is to be done. And to the last belongs the application of this disposition to the effect, which is the carrying out of the work. For it is clear that these three things exist in every kind of operation. And so Dionysius, considering the properties of the orders as derived from their names, places in the first hierarchy those orders the names of which are taken from their relation to God, the seraphim, the cherubim, and thrones. And he places in the middle hierarchy those orders whose names denote a certain kind of common government or disposition, the dominations, virtues, and powers. And he places in the third hierarchy the orders whose names denote the execution of the work, the principalities, angels, and archangels. Now, as regards the end, three things may be considered. For firstly, we consider the end, and then we acquire perfect knowledge of the end. The end meaning the final purpose, which of course is that all things according to the will of God would be complete and perfected. And for each of us, that means that we would go to heaven. That is God's will for us. He does not will for us to be disobedient. He does not will for us to be unrepentant. He does not will for us to choose otherwise than to be with him for eternity. But he gives us the free will to either unite our will with his in that end or for our own end, which, good luck. Let's continue. Okay. And because God is the end of creatures, as the leader is the end of an army, as the philosopher says, so a somewhat similar order may be seen in human affairs. Yes, so human affairs have a certain reflection to all that we've been looking at. So a somewhat similar order may be seen in human affairs, for there are some who enjoy the dignity of being able with familiarity to approach the king or leader, and others in addition are privileged to know his secrets, and above others these ever abide with him in a close union. According to this similitude, we can understand the disposition of the orders of the first hierarchy. For the thrones are raised up so as to be the familiar recipients of God in themselves, in the sense of knowing immediately the types of things in himself, and this is proper to the whole of the first hierarchy. The cherubim know the divine secrets supereminently, and the seraphim excel in what is the supreme excellence of all, in being united to God himself. And all this in such a manner that the whole of this hierarchy can be called the thrones, as from what is common to all the heavenly spirits together, they are all called angels. Now, as regards government, three things are comprised therein, the first of which is to appoint those things which are to be done, and this belongs to the dominations. The second is to give the power of carrying out, which is to be done, which belongs to the virtues. The third is to know what has been commanded or decided to be done can be carried out by others, which belongs to the powers. And the execution of the angelic ministrations consisting in announcing divine things. Now, in the execution of any action, there are beginners and leaders, as in singing, the praecentors, and in war, generals and officers. This belongs to the principalities. There are others who simply execute what is to be done, and these are the angels. Others hold a middle place, and these are the archangels, as above explained. Well, we'll stop there, although there's much more to read, but I think we are at a certain limit of time and perhaps your attention, and maybe you will have paused already by this point, but we are almost at the end here, and I think it's good that we just continue to ponder over all of this, because it does have an effect on our lives as human beings, as we then will have to consider, well, where is our part in the ecclesiastical hierarchy, or rather the earthly hierarchy, if you like to consider it that way. Well, perhaps that will be part of what the Archangel St. Michael reveals to us through having prayed this novena and even after having made these 40 days of St. Michael's Lent. Well, join me tomorrow for the 9th and last day of our novena, and you can find the novena prayers in the description below the video here, and we should now pray that. But otherwise, I will see you tomorrow for the last day of the novena as we consider the angels. And also, be sure to check out the 7th week of St. Michael's Lent as we complete our consideration of St. Francis and his making of St. Michael's Lent, having received the stigmata and the effects of all that. And don't miss a day of prayer with us.